got my session, linear regression. What do you see? I'm just Jeff Lee, got my RMSC.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Today's special guest is Jeff Lee. Jeff is currently a senior data scientist at Spotify, focused on forecasting problems surrounding ads. He got into data science initially by trying to earn a living playing poker, and he previously spent 2 years at Doordash on their core ML team. He was working on a wide variety of problems such as improving experimentation power, personalization, and supply and demand forecasting / driver pay. In this interview, we get deep into the philosophy of learning. You'll hear about how Jeff optimized his dating life through convolutional neural nets, how he learned a new thing each month, and if you're lucky, you might even get to hear him freestyle rap towards the end of the video.
Jeff, thank you so much for agreeing to let me interview you. I think you have such an interesting background relating to data science, but also to, I guess, some of your personal endeavors and kind of the things that you do to really, I guess, enhance your quality of life, which I think is fascinating. I actually first heard about you and reached out to you on LinkedIn from a video you did with Towards Data Science on their YouTube channel about how to get a data science job. And you brought up the briefcase method, which I'd never heard of before. And that's something that I obviously give you credit for, but I talk about in my course a little bit, because that's something that was so unique and something that I had never had experience with. So, there's a lot of things that I've taken away from our conversations, but also from watching you on video. Thank you so much again for agreeing to chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me. And I've seen a good amount of your YouTube videos. So when I saw your name pop up, I was like, oh yeah, I definitely recognize that name, seeing him around. So I definitely am a big fan of what you're doing as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the key. Everyone who's watching, just make sure you have a huge data science focused YouTube channel and people will respond to your messages. It's as simple as that, right?
Yeah, it's easy. It's easy. It's like 2 steps. Snap your fingers and it's yeah.
So we might as well get started with your background and how you first initially got interested in data science. What got the gears turning there? What made you realize that this could be a practical career path for you?
Yeah, so probably around 2014, 2015, I was working in technology consulting, so more on the kind of systems implementation, system design piece of within consulting, and didn't really feel like it was a good fit for me. And at the time, I got really fascinated with just like the process of how we can learn things more effectively. So as a result of that, I started kind of like, trying to test learning projects on myself. So one of them is actually freestyle rap, the one that you're interested in. And then another one was poker. And I had found like a friend of mine who made like 300K from playing poker. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna learn from you. And then I'm gonna like be able to like quit my job, get good enough at poker, like have enough cash to kind of, do whatever I want. So instead of going out on Friday nights, I would actually go out to the casino to play poker. And this wasn't like a ton of time. I was doing this for maybe like a few months. And there was like one specific moment where I like lost a bunch of money on one hand, even though I had like pocket aces, which is basically like I had the highest probability of winning prior to like all the cards going down. And then I realized it wasn't really like a good long-term fit, because if I were to make a lot of money from playing poker, I would have to really, take money from players who are not as good as me. So I'm just basically taking value from others. But I really like the probability and statistical side of things, using like numbers and math to make specific decisions. So that's kind of what got me interested in data science. And I took statistics courses in college. So I really, really liked those courses in college as well. So I felt like data science kind of made sense moving forward. So like studied a lot, went through like Galvanize program, and then I got my first job at DataQuest. And I was there for about a year, and then I moved to Doordash. I was at Doordash for about 2 years working on experimentation, machine learning, and then now I'm at Spotify.
Awesome. And since you recently landed this role at Spotify, you're pretty fresh on the whole interview process. So I'll definitely be asking you a couple questions on that in a little bit here. So, but before that, just out of curiosity, what did you study in undergrad and in school?
I was actually focused on business.
That's super
So
cool.
yeah, most of it was business. Yep.
Well, so they're living, breathing proof. You've had now 3 data science roles. That's correct.
Yeah, this is my third data science role.
You studied business in college. Well, same thing as I did. And you don't have a master's degree, correct?
No, I do not.
I mean, that's something that, those are some of the most common questions that I ask is, can you get into this field without having an advanced degree, without some of those things? And the answer is decidedly yes. It's a lot of work, but at the same time, you were clearly able to do it, and you created an incredible system around the interview process, which I'd actually like to cover more now. We'll move this segment up a little bit because we're kind of talking about it.
Sure.
Out of probably anyone I've seen, you've broken down the interview process into very concrete steps. You've tracked your progress. You've really thought about getting a job as a data scientist like a data scientist. So you thought about that process like a data scientist would. And I think that that's something everyone can learn from. Can you just kind of walk me through your philosophy there? I know you wrote a Medium article specifically about how you landed your positions, and I'll link that below. But I'd love to just get it kind of from your mouth, why you decided to organize it, how you've done it, and where you picked up some of the philosophy that you've developed over time.
Yeah, so I actually picked up a lot of the philosophy from playing poker because one of the things in poker is that you can make the right move, but you can still lose money. But the idea is that as you kind of make more and more of the right decisions over time, you're going to actually make money. It's basically the law of large numbers in statistics. So that I actually kind of took that mindset and applied it to the job hunt, because when you're applying for jobs, it's actually very similar in the sense where whether you get an offer or not, that's kind of out of your control. For example, let's say I crush an onsite, but then somebody behind me that I'm competing with just happens to have a PhD in statistics with tons of years of experience. There's no way I can compete with that. And that's pretty out of my control. But what I can control is being well prepared, putting in the time, getting the numbers right, and putting in the right amount of time. And that's actually where in poker, you actually have to make positive EV decisions, expected value. And I think the same thing applies with applying for jobs. You want to do the things that can kind of maximize your chance of getting an offer. And that's kind of how I approach looking for jobs as well.
That's awesome. I think something really important there is you're taking a lot of pressure off of yourself, because there are so many things out of your control. Your resume might just get put in the wrong pile by accident. And if you're taking that as a personal loss, oh, I'm not good enough, whatever that might be, that's the wrong way to look at it, because there's so many just random stochastic events, so many random events out there that you don't have control over. There's no point and there's no way you would know a lot of the time why you didn't get a call back or some of these things. I don't know if you've read the book. It's called Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. She talks about that exact philosophy that you're bringing up, where you're looking at every scenario in terms of expected value, even more so than you're looking at it in terms of probability. And I can't express to you how much I love that mindset when it comes to the job search, because I think that is something that everyone should strive for. But currently, from a lot of the people I've spoken to, it's a very uncommon approach to take. I talked to the guys over at Sharpest Minds, and they're saying that the average hit rate of a resume drop to get just an interview, to get a phone screen, is between 1% and 2%, right? And that if we're thinking about it, you have to apply to 50, 100 different positions via resume drop to get that first to get one interview. If you're getting 5 interviews out of those 100, you're doing incredibly well, but there's no way you would really know that if you didn't have a benchmark, you didn't have some data to run it against. So during your interview process, Again, you've applied once when you were kind of more on the entry level, and now you're kind of moving towards a more senior level. What have you learned through that whole process of applying, and what do you think is the biggest difference maker for getting a new position?
Yeah, so I would definitely say that depending on your like seniority, that actually can dictate a lot of what your strategy is. So I would say that when you have like fewer years of experience, you have to kind of go more of an unorthodox way of doing things, because like the way I see it is when I had no years of experience, there are a lot of people, there's like a lot of, data science master's degree programs out there churning out entry level data scientists. And I can't, especially for me, I didn't have a traditional like math or computer science background. So I can't compete with everybody else just purely on paper and just like go head to head. Like I love sports, so I think of it as like I'm not giving myself like the home field advantage in that scenario. So like the way I see it then is like, okay, if everybody is like doing this one thing like this, they're just applying directly on the job boards directly, and most people are doing that. Sure, I can do that and maybe get some returns like callbacks, but I can't be doing like I have to kind of think a little bit outside the box and try to do something a little bit more differently. But that's when I have no years of experience, when I'm entry level. As I have more years of experience, you have, say, unique experiences either related to marketing, either related to like sales or whatever side of the business there is, then you kind of develop some more domain knowledge, and it becomes a little bit easier to apply through the front door because you have this unique type of experience. So I think that the biggest shift in strategy is that as I've had more years of experience, it didn't really require me to like, kind of really need to think outside of the box. I still want to maintain that type of mindset, but yeah, I would just say like your seniority kind of dictates the type of strategy you would take.
Awesome. And I have a very similar philosophy, especially when it comes to doing outside projects. So the way I look at it is the more legitimate data science experience, whether it's an internship or whether it's a past position, the less of those outside projects you really need to have on your resume, because you're proving that you can do true data science work if you have a job in it. But if you haven't had exposure to those roles yet, you have to pick it up somewhere else, and it's through those projects. So it's kind of a continuum, just like you're talking about as well. To that point, I believe that you obviously have some very concrete numbers related around your search, but what are some ways that you can be unorthodox? Is that reaching out with cold emails? Is that going through your network? What does that look like to kind of find some of those opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best methods, just from my analysis, is still referrals in terms of getting callbacks. And that's kind of like I do think that when you are getting a referral, it's like you are like kind of going through your network. So that kind of had the highest response rates. Other ways of doing that could be doing cold emails. So you find who the key decision makers are and you send them a cold email. And then what you do then is you attach your resume to that email. And the benefit there is you guarantee somebody will at least look at your resume versus sometimes it'll go in the resume black hole. The other way is the technique you mentioned earlier, the briefcase technique. And the high level summary of that idea is you basically figure out what, like for the team you want to work for, what their problems are, what their pain points are. It could be like data tooling, or they don't have enough resources to solve the specific marketing problem. Figuring out what their problems are and just start trying to solve that problem and propose ideas for it. Because when you do something like that, one, nobody does that. Like I've interviewed a lot of people, they're 0%. I've seen 0% do that. And I would say that because you're already thinking about the problem, if I'm trying to hire you, I'd say, okay, oh, like he's already thought about this problem. He already has some ideas that he can test out. Even though the ideas are not exactly on point, even if I hire him or her, they've already kind of got some juice around the problem. Of course, it doesn't work all the time. I would definitely say that if you were to do anything like that, you still have to pass all the technical interviews. You have to meet the bar, but like once you meet the bar, then you can do something like that. But I've seen like really interesting ideas, like not maybe even outside of data science, like somebody who is trying to become a marketer at Facebook. I saw like an example of him actually buying Facebook ads and targeting the hiring manager, so they would actually see the ads in his Facebook feed or Instagram feed And I thought that's like super creative because that's exactly what would do on the job. And he's actually doing it to try to get himself a job. So I think I saw another designer. She like went through like a Dropbox, like or a SoundCloud, their workflow, figured out where the friction points are, and like mapped out a whole user flow. So you can really adapt this to like whatever profession you're working at. And I think data science, you can definitely, like I did it for data science, like running all the numbers and all that. So yeah, those are a couple things that you can do, but there's so many like out of the box, like the definition of thinking outside the box. It's like it's kind of hard to come up with ideas on the spot. Otherwise, like many people would be able to come up with those ideas. But yeah, those are just a few.
Well, I think that what you said about thinking outside the box is very true, but it's a learned skill as well. Like if I used to do this exercise, I've always been very interested in entrepreneurship, and every day I would try and write down 10 different like new business ideas. And creating that habit means that you start getting really good at thinking up those ideas. At the first day, it takes an hour to think of 10. And then the subsequent days, you start getting a lot better, and you start realizing, oh, if I niche this down and say, what business ideas, or in this, specific scenario, what outside the box ways can I reach people specifically on LinkedIn? Are there features there? Can I get into their comments? Can I post, on the things that they're already posting? Can I add comments, whatever it is? That expands your world even by zoning in just a little bit. And to your point about doing the specific projects for the companies, in my domain, which is sports, if you go to a team, you can have a generalized analysis of the market, like, oh, this is how I've determined teams win. And I can narrow that down to a specific team and deliver that analysis to a decision maker on that team. And if they can, a lot of the times, because sports data is so prevalent, they can use that analysis right there on the spot. And you're going to tell me that that's not going to be interesting, that's not going to be compelling for you to be brought in for an interview? I mean, that's exactly what they're looking for in a candidate, is someone who has the initiative, who clearly has the technical skills because they've brought out, they've done this analysis and quite a few other things. So I love what you're saying there. I mean, it relates again so much to data science, but also even to the niche within sports in that field.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like getting, like, once you kind of know what company you want to go for, you can get very specific to target that company that you want. And in your example, like sports, it's like if you wanted to work for, like, my favorite team in basketball is like the Golden State Warriors. So you can just go on Basketball Reference, scrape that data, and actually try to say, like, pull insights that they can use on the court. And some people might say, oh, like we're like doing free work for them. But I do think it's like it's like it proves that you can do the job, because from a hiring manager's perspective, there's always like a risk because they don't know what your work looks like. They don't know how you work. So by proving that you can actually do the job and ultimately add value just from the start, then it just makes it a much easier decision.
Yeah, and their open rate for your project is probably going to be a heck of a lot higher if it's relevant to their work in general.
Exactly.
If you're doing a project on like agriculture and you send it over to the director of analytics at the Golden State Warriors, they're going to be like, why would it's a cool project, but this has no impact on my life whatsoever.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of like touching on your point earlier on projects, and I actually saw one of your videos on like kind of on data science projects. Like by getting very specific about who you're targeting, that actually can kind of give you a more unique project, because a lot of people are doing the Titanic, Iris data set projects, and that, like, I think it's good for learning, but it doesn't really help you stand out from the crowd. So by having those specific targets, you can actually come up with a very, very unique type of project that helps you stand out from everybody else. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, that brings me to an interesting topic, and that's how do you come up with projects that are unique? That's one thing I get asked a lot. And for me, it's always been easy because I'm always interested in solving problems that are relevant to my life. I'm always interested in saying, hey, I'd like to work at this company. This project would help them. It narrows it down. But you've also come up with some pretty interesting projects yourself. I know you automated Tinder so that it's matched your preferences. You save yourself some. How did you come to that? And what types of other projects have you worked on that that also kind of showcase some of that creativity?
um, so I would say that that project, it's actually very similar to how you come up with the projects. Like, I feel like it's best to think of it from the perspective of problems. Like, what problems do I have in my life, and how can I use my current skill set to solve those problems? Because the worst case scenario is that if you solve the problem but nobody cares about it, you at least solved your problem. And then you also like, or at least you like learn something along the way of solving that problem. So yeah, I like, for me, I was using online dating apps quite a bit, and then I was like not feeling like I wanted to spend the time like swiping, because it was just like taking up a lot of time. So I was like, oh, maybe there's like a way I can like automate this, and like maybe if I can automate the swiping, get my matches, then I can just like decide which person I want to talk to. And I also wanted to learn about neural networks and deep learning, because didn't really have much experience with it. So I was like, oh, okay, this is like actually a perfect opportunity for me to try to solve my own problem. But along the way, I can actually learn about a topic that I've always wanted to learn about. And I can, just basically figure it out. And yeah, that's basically how the project came to fruition. And yeah, it was a pretty fun project. There's like, I had to do a lot of manual swiping to get the training data, but yeah.
Well, I love that. I think that we should be, just like you'd said, solving problems with our projects. And the problems, and it's important to think about the end user, right? Like, who is the problem for? I mean, who's the solution for? And it's totally fine if the solution's for yourself. It shows value to someone if you're building it for yourself. And if you find it useful, it's a pretty high chance other people also would find it useful,
Yeah.
I also love that you were looking to learn more about neural nets, deep neural nets. I assume you used a convolutional neural net.
Yep.
And that was part of the onus for the project, is you were going to apply this to learn it. And that's something I really stress a lot in my videos. I mean, is that how you've gone about learning for the most part, the field and everything along those lines?
Yeah. So, I mean, like, this is kind of like one thought I've been having lately about just like taking courses and just like, getting master's degrees in any kind of field, in where you're learning a lot of these like disparate concepts, but it's not necessarily getting attached to real life problems. So it's like a lot of times I'll like, before I will like learn something, but I'm like, okay, well, I learned this in the context of a course, but it's like, I'm not really sure how this would really work in like a real life problem scenario. But yeah, I would say that my general approach towards learning is to like kind of focus on a problem that I want to solve in my life, or like a subject that I'm very, very interested in, like intrinsically motivated to dive into. Or like if I want to start with a concept, if I like am interested in this concept, I'll try to find a problem that this concept will solve. So like I think there are different ways to kind of dive into it, but it always kind of at least will try to tie back to some sort of problem related, like that this skill can solve. But there's also things like, drawing doesn't necessarily solve a problem, but you can be interested in it as well. So yeah, there are different like motivations, but for a lot of these technical skills, it's usually tied to a problem.
Awesome. Well, I think that that's a really important point you bring up, is that you can have different motivations for learning certain things. I mean, there are some elements of data science that are just like very fascinating to me, like creating some of the different visuals, understanding how they work. I don't necessarily have to have an end product or an end goal. It's like, okay, this is just fun to do, and that's perfectly okay. The other thing that I thought was really interesting that you said is that, and I agree with, is kind of in some of the master's degrees and some of the courses, you get stuck in this kind of loop, right, where you're just like learning courses in theory, and it's not necessarily applied. I've talked with quite a few people who have gone and got their master's degrees in data science or data analytics, and they have no job prospects after they get out. And my thought is that if you are going to do one of those advanced degrees, you should be capitalizing on the other things that institutions offer. So if I'm going to get a master's, I better get an internship while I'm there. I better try and do research while I'm there. Like, those are going to carry you a lot further than just taking the coursework. And that is one of the things that institutions, schools do offer. And that is one of the benefits of the program. If you're going to one of these programs and you're not doing those things, like, it's almost definitely not worth it in my opinion. So that's kind of an aside, but that's something I wanted to call out because it's a very, very common trend that I'm seeing.
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome. Well, I'd kind of like to turn this a little bit more towards some of your extracurriculars. I know you basically for a year, if I understand correctly, um, just try to learn a new skill each month. And I'd like to hear about some of the most interesting things you learned, see if maybe we could apply some of those here, and just get kind of your thoughts on that whole process. It's fascinating to me. It's something I've always kind of wanted to do, and it's very, very inspiring.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of doing that right now with the 66 days of data, just like kind of in a different frame. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I've always been really fascinated with the process of how we can learn better, more effectively, and how we can like retain information. So I kind of the main driver behind that project was I was always very curious about like, hey, can I kind of come up with a framework? Actually, it's very similar to how I approach the like recruiting or in job searching, where I build out this systematic framework. So I was thinking about at the time, how can I build this systematic framework for learning any skill that I want, whether it's like coding or any kind of sport. And I saw another guy, his name is like Max Deutsch. He did something very similar, like pretty basically like this. And I saw him do it. And I was like, oh damn, like it's very possible. I'm gonna do it myself. And yeah, I did. Like a lot of the skills, they range from like social skills, deep learning, surfing. My favorite was probably like I had a remote job at the time, so I like moved to Colombia and I just lived in Colombia, Medellin, Colombia, and just learned Spanish there. When I was learning surfing, I just moved to Costa Rica for a month and just like surfed every day in
That's
Costa Rica.
sick.
So, yeah, and then the other ones were kind of like like memorizing a deck of cards in like a couple minutes, things like that. So but yeah, that was like the high level overview of the project. And I generally have like I don't want to get too in the weeds, but like a general structure of how I can take a skill, break it down into these different milestones, figure out the best approaches, techniques to kind of dive into that skill. And I'm still learning, I'm still experimenting, but yeah, that's the high level. And yeah, I can dig into detail wherever you find interesting.
Yeah, well, you have some. Do you have some documentation on the high level like structure you create? I'll definitely link that below for everyone who's interested. I assume you wrote a Medium
Yeah.
post or quite
Yeah.
a few
So
on it.
yeah, so I was blogging. My commitment was also to blog every day about it. Like I wasn't trying to write really well because if I'm blogging every day, it's not going to be like super crisp. But on the first day of every month, I would actually create out a project plan, which is actually on Medium, so I can share that with you
Yeah, heck
after,
yeah.
and you can kind of see how I broke down the skill. So yeah.
So what was you said obviously going to Colombia and then Costa Rica, those seem pretty sick. What were some of the highlights? What was your favorite thing to learn in that period?
Uh, Spanish was really, really cool, mainly because everybody in Colombia didn't speak English. So I basically had to learn it in order to communicate with everybody. So there is like a factor of when you put yourself in a scenario where you're forced to learn something, you will learn it a lot faster. So I kind of intentionally put myself in that scenario. And yeah, it was just like I was like an Asian guy, Asian American guy, like there's no Asian American guys in Colombia,
So
so yeah,
where in Colombia did you go? Bogota
Medellin,
or Medellin?
yeah.
I have an uncle who's half Chinese, half Colombian. I mean, I know
Interesting.
half Cuban. Sorry, and he lives in Medellin. I
Oh,
should
interesting.
have hooked you guys up. But
Yeah.
so how fluent in Spanish did you get? Is like purely conversational, or what was the
Yeah,
stage that you found yourself at?
yeah, the goal was so my goal was actually to be able to go on a date with a girl in complete Spanish, and I was actually able to do that like kind of near the last day, so that was basically my goal. But I would definitely say right now I would not be able to speak it very well because I have not been keeping it up. But I do have a video on the Medium, me having like have a conversation with somebody, so you can kind of check that out if you like. But yeah, that was my goal. But I like generally like when you're learning anything, it's very important to have a very crisp outcome or like level of performance that you want to get to, because a lot of people say they want to learn Spanish or whatever, but it's like there's like infinite number of levels. So it's like
What does that mean exactly?
yeah, what specifically, it's like with any skill, what specifically do you want to either produce or perform at with that skill? And then it makes it very easy to craft the curriculum or the progression to get to that specific outcome.
Well, I think that that is really, really important. Again, if we flip this over towards data science, I try to stress for people to have very concrete goals about what they want to accomplish, because I hear so many people saying, "Oh, I want to learn data science in 6 months," or "I want to do this, I want to do that," and that means nothing to me. I still haven't like learned data science, right? I mean, this field is a bottomless pit of the number of things you can learn. And I'm sure you're familiar with the framework. I think it's SMART goals. So, oh my goodness, simple,
Specific,
no,
measurable.
specific, yeah, specific, measurable, attainable, and then I forget what the T stands for, but
I think
what
it's
does
like time-based, time-bound or
time-based?
something.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Here I am
That's all
bringing it
good.
up, and you're the one that knows it all. Well, you practiced it a lot better than I have recently. So,
Probably.
but yeah, I mean, like exactly what does that mean? So maybe something a little bit better is in the next 6 months, I want to know enough so that I can land a data science job, right? That to me is okay. It's a little bit better. But if you were to say, oh, I want to do projects on this, project on this, project on this, all of these, maybe one on regression, one on clustering, one on classification, all in this time period, that is so much more likely to happen because I mean it's a line in the sand. It's not an idea anymore, and so I think that that is again just such a valuable insight that people can take away from you, who I wouldn't say again is mastered learning, but probably has a little more experience learning at this point, or is a little more fresh with it than most of us are.
Yeah, and like what another good thing about having a very specific goal is it actually, like, say when people come to you for help, it makes it much easier for you to help them. So because it's like, hey, I'm looking for a specific, let's say for example with recruiting, I am looking for a data scientist role at a mid-sized tech company, ideally focused on healthcare, where I can be running and controlling all the A/B testing experiments. That's like one made-up example. Then it's like, oh, okay, then okay, he's or she is really interested in experimentation. And at this type of company, these are the types of experiments that I know that they're going to run. So I'm going to send them some articles, or they should meet this person because they would have the expertise to help them. Compared to like say, hey, I want to learn data science. Well, it's like such a big field, and as you've kind of alluded to, uh, as I learn more data science, I realize I don't know anything. So it's just like, oh, there's just like way too many things I need to learn. So it's really like an infinite pit of topics and subjects. So yeah.
Well, that also brings up another interesting point that ties a lot of this together, whether it's dating, whether it's learning, whether it's all of these things, is that some of the specificity, having some standards on your end about the positions you apply to, saying that, hey, this is what I'm looking for in a job. A lot of people think that minimizes your chances, right? And it probably does cut out some of the potential opportunities. But on the flip side, it enriches a lot of the individual or smaller interactions that you have. If we're thinking about this like dating, if you do show that you have some standards, there's a lot higher chance of, a relationship forming or someone being interested in you because they see, you're zoning in on them. They're like, oh, I've passed his standards. Like there is some like social status associated with that. And same thing with the data science side. If you're specific in what you want in a role, or you're specific in what you're looking at in terms of the culture, the work-life balance, they'll see that like, okay, if he's a really good candidate and we don't meet him partway on some of these things, he might go somewhere else. That kind of flips the psychology around on their end. And I think that's a very, very powerful thing that a lot of people don't think about. It. They think, oh, I'm narrowing my chances, but no, you're increasing your chances with the smaller group that is probably going to be interesting to you anyway.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like interesting because it's a paradox, because there's like, I can understand the feeling where you feel like you have to blast your resume to like hundreds of companies to increase your chances. But it's like when you also get, like, I know there's kind of a contradiction, like it's kind of a numbers game, but also getting targeted. But I think one kind of good analogy is like when, let's say like you're on like LinkedIn, or like you get somebody's emailing you and you have like 100 people send you a generic email. But then say for you, Ken, you love sports. And I remember you said you played golf before. Somebody wrote you a very specific email about how they love golf and like they did all these projects related to golf and they love entrepreneurship. You're much more likely to reply to that person who spent like a little bit more time to get specific about like with their message crafted to you, like who you are as a person, versus like 100 people sending like very generic messages. So there is a little bit of a kind of I guess in marketing it's kind of like targeting that really does help your response rate by doing something like that.
Yeah, I think if we roll it back a little bit and think about it in terms of expected value of an interaction, when someone puts that little bit more time,
Yeah.
Expected value of time, I think it is definitely a better expected value if you're putting a little bit more time rather than blasting for the potential opportunities, potential job wise or whatever it might be. So
Yeah.
it's nice when things kind of come around full circle. So if I recall, you also, one of the things you learned was freestyling. Is that correct?
I would say not in the month to master, but I did it before. So yes, I definitely freestyling is one of those things.
Would you be open to freestyling on some data science topics? You can turn me down. I won't be offended.
No, I'm down. Let's do it. I love freestyling.
Do you need a beat, or can you go with just with me throwing out some terms?
I could go off turn, but like throwing a beat makes it just sound better.
All right, first word, data.
Yo, look at me sitting right where I wanna play it. Oh, look at me, I see it right later. Right here, gotta analyze my data. Got my session, linear regression. What do you see? I'm just Jeff Lee. Got my RMSC. Look at me. I got OLS. If you know me, I'm the DSJ. Okay.
All right,
Throw me
Occam's
another word.
razor.
Okay, look, I'm like a tiger, say grr. Model simple, Occam's razor. Got my razor shaving off my face. Look at me, I'm Usain Bolt winning that race. Okay, look, see we talking about jobs. You gotta apply to every single time. It's a numbers game. You gotta apply every single time. Look, running your tail like foxtail, cold emails. You wanna look at me? I'm tripping over my words. I don't even care because you know my rap is
Hey,
too
nearest
bad. It ain't
neighbor.
fair. Okay, look.
KNN's fine.
Okay, that's better. Look at me. Ken, I want your autograph. Give me your pen because I got my dots, KNN. I got a cluster, unsupervised, non-parametric. Tell me what I gotta do with my numbers. With my numbers, tune them up, tune them up. K equals 5 or K equals 10. I do it just bit by bit, but I'm a little afraid that I'm just gonna overfit. Oh,
I love
right.
that. That was so good, man. I love it. I love it. Well, definitely kudos. That's not something that I don't think we've had anyone freestyle on the interviews before. So excellent job. Thank you for indulging me there. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it wasn't I wouldn't say it was my best, but it works. It's good enough.
Hey, live off the cuff. That's what's important,
Yeah.
But so those are kind of all the questions I had. Is there anything you'd like to let the world know? Anything you're working on? And also, how can people learn more about you?
Yeah, so I think I'll tackle it one by one. So in terms of like letting the world know, I would say that I think a lot of your audience, they're like data scientists. They're looking for data science jobs. Would you say that's like your general audience?
Very much so.
Okay. So, I mean, I think the one thing I would say to them is that I know a lot of people are probably struggling with, say, recruiting. They're trying to get their first job. And of course, it's very easy for me to say, like, with my job, that hey, like, you got to focus on things you can control. And it might seem like I had it all figured out, but I really don't. I would say that there were scenarios where there were things that were out of my control that I was very frustrated about. And so I definitely do need to heed my own advice sometimes. And I think that, yeah, and I think for anybody who is still struggling, just like, I would say that, uh, see it from a data science lens, see everything you're doing as an experiment. And as you kind of see it as an experiment, that kind of gives you some freedom to try different things. If something isn't working, it's not necessarily passing your experiment. Try something else, try to, like, and don't be afraid to, like, try new things, and it may or may not work. But especially if what you're doing, if you're applying to hundreds of jobs and you're not getting any responses, I would definitely say just take that experimentation mindset and apply it to whatever you're doing right now. And then,
Okay.
yeah, I think your other questions were things I'm working on right now. Nothing too much, just focusing on really kind of building out my skill set. I have a website, jeffleechronicles.com. Lee is spelled Li.
I'll link it below.
I like, yeah, like I write article. I don't really write too consistently, but I usually will write when I feel like I have something to say. And then, yeah, and you can follow me on Twitter. I just kind of started really getting a little bit more on Twitter. So Jeff MLI. So M as in Mary. I think those words can get confused. But yeah, otherwise, like, if anybody is struggling or has any questions, feel free to just reach out to me on Twitter, or if you can find my email on my website, you can email me as well. And then, yeah, I think that's pretty much it for me.
Sweet. I should have both of our Twitter handles under our picture for the majority of the video. So definitely go check him out on Twitter. He shares some awesome stuff. I've shared quite a few of his. I think I shared your Tinder article as well as your job search article this time around. I found them very, very fascinating. So definitely thank you for putting that out there. It was one, entertaining, but also I think very useful to a lot of people.
Got it. Yeah. And yeah, thanks for sharing. And thank you so much for having me. And hopefully this was valuable to whoever was watching.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on.